And the title company said, "We're sorry, we didn't realize that this was an assignment of contract. We didn't get your email that you sent to us earlier in the week," which blew my mind, because then what they were telling me was that not only did they not get our A to B contract and B to C contract, which was the original purchase agreement and the assignment agreement, not only did they not get that, but that means that on the day that we were supposed to close, they just had some brand new random buyer walk into their office, sign all the paperwork, that was a completely different name and a completely different buyer than the original contract, but yet they claimed that they never got the assignment of contract. Today, again, what we're doing is we're going to be talking about how to get paid as a real estate investor who uses wholesaling as an exit strategy, and what to use to your advantage. Now, for those of you who don't know, what I like doing is I love using AI to help me with my slides. These slides help me stay organized, help me keep my thoughts in order. But more importantly, it does give me a chance to get a little bit creative. So when I was coming up with the idea for these slides, one of the things that I thought of was, well, number one, our mascot, Dispo the Dragon, our Tiffany blue and neon green dragon, dressed as a knight in shining armor, using a shield that says the word HUD on it. Why? Because the HUD statement, the ALTA statement, the settlement statement, the closing statement, all of those things mean the exact same thing depending on the state that you're operating in. But really, it's just your last line of defense to ensure that you are going to get paid your assignment fee as a real estate investor, as a real estate wholesaler. So that was the idea that I came up with. And as you can tell, or maybe you can't tell, depending on the device that you're using, you're looking at our mascot wearing a knight's armor uniform, using the HUD shield in front of a title company, getting ready to go get paid after our Dispo the Dragon mascot has closed and successfully closed a wholesale transaction. All right, so that's our slide using AI. Be sure that if you're looking at this, that you like, follow, share, okay, the content that we're working on, because it does take time, it does take effort. We do this for absolutely free. The cost of admission is just that you like, share, and follow. Make sure that you do that. Now, on all of our social media handles, we are at Dispo Dragons, plural, Dispo Dragons, okay? So make sure that if you know of anybody that is having challenges in this business, in this profession, they're looking for some guidance, they're looking for some help, you can steer them our way, you can share our content with them, and hopefully it'll help them out. Hopefully it helps you out as well. So be sure you like, share, and follow. All right, couple things. I always like to start with a quote, and one of the quotes that I heard today was when I was listening to Bishop T.D. Jakes as I was on my way to work out, and what he said was that God has never made a single table. Right? And I thought that was very profound. What he did was he made the trees, and he gave man the mind. He gave man the faculties, or woman, man or woman, don't want to come off sexist. He gave us the faculties to make the table. So a lot of times what people are doing is we're going out there and we're looking for all the solutions to our problems, expecting to see the final product, expecting to see the finish line, expecting to see the 1 yard line. We expect to see the table when we're surrounded by a bunch of trees and we're not taking the effort to go over there, chop down a tree, do the work, build our table. All right. God has never built a table, but what he did was he provided us with the trees, the faculties, the talents, the skills, and the abilities to make those tables. So when you are working and you're looking for the solutions and you're looking for the final product, really what you want to also be focusing on is on your skill set and the gifts and the talents that you have been born and blessed with, so that you could build whatever it is that you want to build. All right, I thought that was a really profound quote, so hopefully it has an impact on you. Now, for those of you who don't know, I did write a book. It is called Deal Like a Dove, Dispo Like a Dragon. It is currently on Amazon. It is 400 pages of how to build this business, how to invest in real estate and use wholesaling as an exit strategy. I couldn't come up with a 20-page PDF blueprint. I couldn't come up with just a quick chat bot that would give you all of those details. So what I did was I put it all, and we're talking over about 30 years worth of experience, again, collectively as a real estate agent, as a real estate broker, as a real estate investor, and as a real estate wholesaler. All of that combined, put into one book of 400 pages on how to build this business. You can pick it up on Amazon. I did a real quick shortcut to the link. You can go to bit.ly, whatever you want to call it, /Dispo Dragon Book. Okay, bit.ly /Dispo Dragon Book. Amazon isn't a real big fan of redirect links. So when you click that link or when you go to that link, what will happen is it's going to ask you to click one more button to confirm you're a real person. And then it'll take you straight to the Amazon page. Now you can listen to it too. You can buy it two different ways. You can listen to it on Audible, and you can also read it as well if you have a Kindle, or you can order the paperback book, right? There are plenty of people that want to order the paperback version as well, and you can do that too. So you can get it on Kindle, you can get it on Audible. Let me see. Sorry about that. I'm just looking at some of the chat and some of the stuff that's going on during the live stream. Anyway, so if you need a QR code, you can click on the QR code. You can scan the QR code, and it'll take you directly to the Amazon link. All right. Now, one thing that I like to do is I like to talk about mentorship. What you're looking at is an image of Jay-Z and Warren Buffett. Now, if you don't know who Jay-Z is, and you definitely don't know and if you don't know who Warren Buffett is, you've been sleeping under a rock, right? Jay-Z was already wildly successful when he approached Warren Buffett, and he went to him and he basically said, listen, what do I need to do so that I could rub elbows with you and with other billionaires, and what can you be my mentor? He basically went to Warren Buffett and asked him to mentor him on his businesses. Now, Jay-Z was already successful, and Warren Buffett took him under his wing, and now Jay-Z is a multi-billionaire, and now not only is he a multi-billionaire, but he has mentored other multi-billionaires within his stable, within his house, within his companies. We're talking about people like Rihanna and other, very, very sharp business people as a result of what he has learned. Why am I sharing this with everybody? Well, we have a profit sharing mentorship within our organization as well. All right. Now, the way the profit sharing mentorship works is that you have someone who is going to walk you through the entire process on how to build this business. They will help you close your leads. You do the work for the lead generation. I don't want to set any false expectations. You still will have to put in the work. You will still have to put in the effort, but you will have a bona fide closer on call, ready to call those leads with you, ready to call those sellers with you, ready to call those agents with you, ready to negotiate the deals with you, ready to fill out paperwork with you, so that you will learn from A to Z how to do this business. And then when the deal is closed, what happens is those profits are dispersed accordingly. Okay, so we have a profit sharing mentorship where you learn, you earn as you learn the business, and now you have someone who is there really hand holding you through the process. This isn't just, here's 100 videos, go watch the videos and figure this thing out on your own. Now you really have someone who's going to be speaking to people on your behalf, and they have an incentive because they know they're going to get a percentage of those profits as well. To learn more about it, go to bit.ly /DD profit sharing. Okay, bit.ly /DD profit sharing. Okay, and you can learn more about it. Okay, now let's talk about how we are going to ensure that you get paid. Okay, because you're putting in all this hard work, you're putting in all this effort, and so we want to make sure that as a real estate investor, that as a real estate wholesaler, you are going to get paid for the work and for the effort that you put in. So let's talk about how we get paid, all right? How you get paid depends on how you structured the deal from the very, very beginning. This is important. There's three ways that you can typically structure a deal, okay? There's direct to seller, all right, also known as DTS, and no, that is not a K-pop band. Direct to agent, that says STA, but it should say DTA, direct to agent, not DTA anyway. And the third one is JV agreement. Okay, so typically those are going to be the three ways that a deal is going to be structured. You're either going to have a contract directly with the seller, or you're going to have a contract with a seller through an agent who has helped you draft up that contract, or you're going to be working as a joint venture with someone that has a contract with the seller, one of those two ways. So there's direct to seller, there's direct to seller through an agent, direct to agent, and then there's also through a joint venture agreement, right, which a lot of wholesalers are very familiar with. Now, direct to seller, again, we talked about that. That is where we're going to be focusing strictly on that style, on that strategy, on that way of doing business right now. We're not going to talk about the direct to agent, and we're not going to talk about doing joint ventures right now. Right now, we're just going to cover the basics on how to structure a direct to seller deal and ensuring that you get paid, right? So ensuring that you can avoid any of the pitfalls that we've all experienced, the veterans have experienced in this business after making a lot of mistakes. So let's talk about direct to seller. Now, an investor-friendly contract is your first line of defense when you are working with a seller. Okay, when you're drafting up your contract, make sure that you have a purchase agreement, right, that is investor-friendly, that has language in there allowing you the ability to be able to market the deal, the opportunity, right, the assignment of contract, the equitable interest that allows you the ability to market any of those things or all of those things. Acknowledging that you are an investor purchasing the property at what might be perceived a discount, you're purchasing at what might not be perceived fair market value, and that you are purchasing it for profit. And in that contract, that it stipulates that you reserve the right to assign the contract to another end buyer. All of that stuff should be in the purchase agreement. Okay, so keep it. If you don't have a copy of a purchase agreement that has all of those things, then you're probably going to have to talk to a mentor, you're going to have to talk to a JV partner, and you're going to have to get your hands on a contract that does have all of those things. Now, just for one quick second, what I'm going to do is I'm also going to check to see if there's any other comments on here. Nothing right now. Okay, cool. Now, the next thing, your purchase agreement with the seller must include language that authorizes you to be able to assign the contract. All right, I already went over that. That language should be in there. It's very, very important. Now, there are some states where this is going to change, right? Remember that a lot of states now are going through regulation. So they're creating regulation, not only regulation, but they're also creating registration. So if you're in a state where you have to register yourself as a wholesaler, do it. You're going to have to pay the $300 to register, or whatever fee it is that they're charging. If they're requiring that you get a real estate license, then get the real estate license so that way you can operate in your state. If you're going to be doing this virtually, where it requires you to have a real estate license to do this, then what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to partner up with a real estate agent local to that state, in that state, and they're going to have to help you do it as well. Now that changes everything here, so I'm not really going to talk about those strategies. Again, right now we're just talking about the basic purchase agreement, direct to seller, okay, where you can assign, where you can operate in those states where you don't need a license, okay. So your purchase agreement with the seller must include language that authorizes you to be able to assign the contract. And let's get an understanding of how this works. When you have a contract with a seller, that is what is called your A to B contract. A being the seller, B you being the buyer, the original buyer. So it is an A to B. That's your original contract. Now, when you find, if you are wholesale the property and you find an end buyer to purchase the property and you assign the opportunity, you assign the contract for profit. When you assign the equitable interest, right? And I'm saying all of these things because a lot of these same words are interchangeable and they mean the same thing. So when you hear other people using one word versus another word, they're basically the exact same thing. Okay, so you're assigning the contract, you're assigning the opportunity, you're assigning the deal, you're assigning the equitable interest, you're assigning this to another end buyer. And when you do that, it is now a B to C contract, right? Because now it's A, the seller, B, you, the buyer, and C, the new buyer. Okay, that becomes the B to C contract. Okay, so you'll hear people using these expressions. I just want you to be familiar with them. And when that happens, that buyer inherits all of the duties, all of the responsibilities that were in the original contract. Okay, they are inheriting that. You are assigning it to them. They are becoming responsible for all of the details in the original contract, which means that if I'm a buyer who is going to be purchasing a contract from someone who is going to be assigning me the purchase agreement, the deal, the opportunity, the equitable interest, and they want to assign it to me, I'm going to want to know what I am taking on, what I am going to be held responsible for. So it isn't uncommon for a buyer to request a copy of the original A to B contract. But Paul, if I give them a contract, they're going to be afraid of, I should be afraid of them seeing how much money I'm going to make and what it is that I am earning. Okay, look, let's talk about that for one quick second, all right? Most people, all right, know that you're assigning the contract for profit. All right. Now, that's the first thing. The second thing is that you can always just redact the price on the original purchase agreement so that the buyer doesn't see that and they don't necessarily use that as leverage to negotiate with you. But at the end of the day, and we're going to talk about this on the settlement statement, they're going to see exactly how much money it is that you are making. All right. So you can address it now or you can address it later. Buddy, I'm going to be uploading the lead list and again, get multiple leads. Thank you, Elia. All right, so the buyer inherits the original contract. The buyer is responsible for all of the terms on the original contract, including the earnest money deposit that needs to be in there, including the inspection period, including the option period if applicable, any of that stuff. So they're going to ask to see a copy of that contract. You can redact it or you can share it with them. They're going to find out anyway, okay? Just FYI. Now, next slide. You transfer your contractual rights and your obligations to the new buyer, which means that if you had a 7-day inspection period and you already ate up your 7-day inspection period, what that means is that the new buyer, no longer has an inspection period, right? Because that 7-day inspection period was just eaten up. So what you will then have to do is you will then have to go back to the seller, draft up an amendment, and extend that inspection period for the new buyer. Okay. Now, I'm not going to wax too deep on this stuff right now because I can keep us here going into a lot of very detailed analysis of the purchase agreement, and we're not going to do that. But just understand that when you assign the contract to them, they take over everything. Every single thing. Okay. Now, once you have your A to B contract signed, and then your B to C contract, which is your assignment contract, signed, and you've got everything signed, you now have the contract fully assigned for a profit. What you're going to do is you're going to notify the closing entity. Now, what is a closing entity? It's the title company, it's the closing attorney, or it's the escrow company. All right. Every state is a little bit different. Some states use an escrow company and then they have a title company. Some states use a title company that handles the escrow process and the title. And there's some states where it's common for you to use a closing attorney because it's less expensive. Or some people just prefer to use a closing attorney, but they will still have to do a title search anyway. So another title company is involved. Either way, there's a title company, there's potentially an escrow attorney, and then an escrow company. Okay. What you will have to do once you have your A to B contract and your B to C contract fully executed by all parties is you're going to have to notify the closing company that you have assigned the contract. Okay. Now, if you've done everything that you're supposed to do, you have a contract that says that you can assign it, and then you have an assignment contract signed by the new buyer, and the new buyer understands the terms that they've accepted by accepting your A to B contract. Okay, if everything is done correctly, now you're going to notify the closing company. The closing company is then going to get into contact with the new buyer, and the new buyer is going to make their earnest money deposit. Okay, it isn't uncommon for your assignment agreement to have a different amount for the earnest money deposit versus your original A to B contract that you've executed with the seller. So it isn't uncommon for an assignment agreement to say, I'm assigning you this contract, and part of the stipulation for me assigning you this contract is that the earnest money deposit is going to be $3,000. But you may, in your original agreement, you may have agreed to a $500 earnest money deposit with the seller. Well, all that means is that the buyer is going to put the $3,000, and out of that $3,000, that's obviously going to be applied towards the seller's earnest money deposit. Now, if you really want to do it the right way, The right way is for you to deposit the $500. You will get that $500 reimbursed at closing, that as for your earnest money, and then the buyer has a new earnest money deposit that went in for your assignment agreement. Okay, I'm not going to go into the details too much, but just understand that that's the process. Now, fair warning, not all closing companies are investor friendly. Okay, there are some title companies that are going to refuse to allow you to assign the contract to another end buyer. They're not gonna. No, I shouldn't say they're going to refuse. They're just not going to act as the closing company. They'll tell you, we won't do this deal. Okay, we're not going to participate in this. And then you'll have to take it to another closing company. Some of them are not investor friendly. But at the end of the day, closing companies do what they're instructed to do based on the purchase agreement and the assignment agreement as well. So they are a neutral third party. They will do whatever both parties tell them to do in writing. That doesn't necessarily mean that they have to accept your business, though. They can always say, well, we're not going to handle the transaction for you, take it somewhere else. But at the end of the day, I want to make this very clear, because once you take your A to B contract and your B to C contract to any type of a closing company, that closing company is going to follow exactly what it says in that purchase agreement and in that assignment agreement to the T. They will not make any amendments. They will not make any changes to what was agreed upon. And their job is to just act as a neutral third party, ensuring that the seller does what they said they were going to do and the buyer does what they say they were going to do. Okay, all per the contract. All right, keep that in mind. Very, very important. Now, if your original purchase agreement lacks language about an assignment, in other words, if your original purchase agreement doesn't say anything about your ability to assign the contract, don't just assume that because that language is there, or because there isn't language that says that you cannot assign the contract, don't assume that because that language is missing, or because there is language that doesn't say that you can't do it, that you're not that you can just assign it. There are going to be some title companies that are going to say that you're going to have to draft up an amendment allowing you the ability to assign that contract to another person. Okay, that's just the way some of them operate, and they want to make sure that they cross their T's and dot their I's. The other day I said cross your I's and dot your T's. Anyway, you get the point. So just be aware that if your purchase agreement doesn't have that, then there's a good chance that they're going to ask you to draft up an amendment for you basically saying that it can be the purchase agreement, to be amended to reflect that buyer, whatever your buying entity, can assign the contract to, and then you have to put the new entity's name in there. Okay, that does come up. Now, all that said, you've done the work. You found a seller, you found a buyer, you've got your A to B, your B to C contract, you've put it together, it's nice and neat, everything is in order, you send it to your closing company does what they're supposed to do, seller does what they're supposed to do, buyer does what they're supposed to do, and we're getting ready to close. When you are 5 to 7 days before closing, I need you to request a closing statement from the closing company. Okay. Now, a closing statement is also known as a closing disclosure, a HUD-1, a settlement statement, or an ALTA statement. Okay. Again, depending on the state, depending on the type of closing entity that you are using, depending on who it is that you're using, they will call it a different thing. But they all understand that it's a closing disclosure, a closing statement, a HUD-1, a settlement statement, or an ALTA statement. They all understand what that means. 5 to 7 days before you get ready to close, you need to ask for a settlement statement. Why? Why do I want you to do that? The reason that I want you to do that is because a settlement statement, for those of you who don't know, that I know that there are some of you who have a very good idea of what it is. You have real estate backgrounds, you've seen HUDs, you've seen settlement statements. What it is it's a comprehensive document, right? And it shows the seller's expenses or debits and credits on one side and the buyer's debits and credits on the other side. And it's really just a long sheet that highlights where all the money is going to. It lists all the expenses, it lists all the credits, it lists who's paying for what. It looks a little bit something like, let me show you real quick, this, okay? So it's a whole line item that has all of the expenses on there, who's paying for what, who's getting what, how much money the buyer needs to bring. And then in the end, I know you may not be able to see this, but it even shows you the assignment fee in there. And going back to what I said earlier, in this particular sample that I'm sharing with you, it even shows you the earnest money reimbursement. So in this case, the earnest money was even reimbursed to the wholesaler. This was a JV deal that we did in Houston not too long ago, about 3 or 4 weeks ago. And we did it as a JV. We worked on it together. The original contract holder put the earnest money in. We found the buyer. We split the fee. Everybody was happy. But it showed up on the settlement statement. Now, why am I showing you this? Okay. Because this settlement statement is an opportunity for you to, number one, make sure that you're getting the right amount. Okay, because I can't tell you the number of times where we've done deals and the assignment fee does not, number one, doesn't show up, or number two, they didn't even know there was an assignment fee, or number three, they get the assignment fee, the amount wrong. Okay, and we just closed one recently in another state where I don't even know how this is humanly possible, but we sent the A to B contract and the B to C contract over to the title company, and then they proceeded to close. And then I had been asking for a settlement statement for days, 3 or 4 days, and we didn't get it. But on the 4th day or 5th day, they sent a settlement statement to the new buyer, and then the new buyer wired in their funds to close without me having had a chance to review the settlement statement so that I could make sure that our assignment fee was in there and that it was intact. Okay. Well, guess what? They didn't put the assignment fee on that settlement statement. So the buyer who was supposed to wire in money wired in less than what they were supposed to wire in because our fee wasn't included in there. And the title company said, we're sorry, we didn't realize that this was an assignment of contract. We didn't get your email that you sent to us earlier in the week, which blew my mind. Because then what they were telling me was that not only did they not get our A to B contract and B to C contract, which was the original purchase agreement and the assignment agreement, not only did they not get that, but that means that on the day that we were supposed to close, they just had some brand new random buyer walk into their office, sign all the paperwork. That was a completely different name and a completely different buyer than the original contract, but yet they claimed that they never got the assignment of contract. Anyway, I'm not going to get into it. We resolved it. It closed. Everybody got paid. No big deal. But the point is, this is why I'm sharing this with you. It is absolutely critical that you review the settlement statement, the closing disclosure, the closing statement, the HUD, the ALTA statement, whatever you want to call it, all of those things. You need to ask for a closing statement. They'll know what that means. You need to review it at least 5 to 7 days before closing, because once that deal's closed, it's very difficult to get your money. Now, this is where your assignment fee is clearly documented and paid. It's going to show up on the settlement statement, whatever that amount is. That's your opportunity. Okay, that's your chance to say, this is my fee, this is what I'm supposed to make, I need to see it on there. And they'll show you where it is in the form of a line item. It's also your last chance to verify accuracy and ensure that you get paid. All right, you're going to have a very, I shouldn't say you're not, you're going to have a very difficult, you're going to have a very challenging time trying to collect that money post closing. And if there is an error, okay, if there happens to be an error, and again, I'm sharing experiences with you because we've made these mistakes. There was one time on an assignment of contract, we agreed to only pay up to 1% of the closing costs, up to 1%. Well, guess what? The closing costs exceeded that 1%. So guess where the difference came from? Well, they took it out of our assignment fee, and I didn't realize that until we got paid, we got wired. At that point, once we got our assignment fee wired, I realized that there was a shortage of like $2,300, and I went to go look at it, and I went to see why that shortage was there, and it was because of our original assignment agreement, which said that the new buyer would only pay up to 1% of the closing costs, right? So we would have to cover the rest. And on our original agreement with the seller, our A to B contract with the seller, we'd said we'd pay all the closing costs. So A to B, the seller, we're paying all the closing costs. B to C, the buyer only has to pay up to 1% of the purchase price as the closing costs. And so there was a shortage, and they took it out of our assignment fee. Now, had I caught that earlier, and I should have, but sometimes we get busy, Even the veterans make some mistakes sometimes. Had I caught that earlier, 5 to 7 days before, what I could have done was I could have renegotiated that with the buyer and told them, hey, listen, this was clearly a mistake. You knew you were going to cover your closing costs, but it had already closed, and it was, and so of course we didn't end up getting it. So that's your last chance to verify accuracy. Okay. The assignment fee is a line item. I already showed you what that line item looks like. It looks like something like that, and it will show up. It will either say assignment fee, it will say some type of a fee, but the most common language is the assignment fee. Sometimes as a wholesaler, you might agree to cover certain costs. So I just gave you an example of, of how we had to cover the costs of certain things. Now, as a wholesaler, sometimes you also agree to cover certain expenses for the seller. You also you agree to cover repairs. Maybe you agree to cover commissions if another agent gets involved. Whatever the case may be, sometimes you agree to pitch in on some of these expenses. And if you're going to agree to pitch in on some of these expenses, which is fine and which is normal, then you're going to want to make sure that that is also reflected on the settlement statement. Okay, very important. Any such agreements must be reflected on the settlement statement. I already talked about that. The HUD, again, is your shield. It's your last line of defense to make sure you are getting paid the correct amount based on the terms that you agreed to with the seller and with the buyer, which is why you request a copy of that HUD, of that settlement statement, of that closing statement, of that ALTA prior to closing. All right, that's the reason that we created that image with AI holding that shield, right, that said HUD 1. Once the deals are closed, I already said this, but it's difficult getting additional money from the buyer. Right, it has never gone well. It sours the closing. You know, you're upset, they're upset. You're trying to chase them down for more money. But see, that could have been prevented had you just reviewed the settlement statement 5 to 7 days prior. Right, it could have. So make it a good practice to review those statements first, and that's it. Right, so I hope that you saw value in what it is that we shared with you. I know that for some people, especially if you're brand new, this doesn't necessarily sound relevant to you yet, but there will come a time where it will be very, very relevant to what you are doing, especially if you get a property under contract, and especially if you're assigning it to another end buyer. Now, understand that this still applies to the direct to agent and the direct to seller and the JV agreements. It still applies to those types of contracts, but the strategies are obviously going to be a little bit different. Okay, so hopefully this helped you out. We're going to be sharing this video on our YouTube channel and on our school community. Now, if you don't know about our school community, you can join. We call it the Dispo Dragons Dollar Club. It costs $1 to join. Don't be cheap. Okay, it's $1 and it's lifetime access. You go now. Why do we do that? But Paul, there's all this free information on the web. Why do I need to pay $1 to join? Look, here's the reason that we do that. Okay, it's so that way we don't have all the tire kickers. Okay, that way, I know it's only $1, but you'd be surprised how that almost acts as a gatekeeper to the people that really want to improve themselves and the ones that really just, I'm just browsing, and if it's interesting to me, great, and if not, no big deal. Okay, what we have is a community where people are participating, they're collaborating with one another, they're working with one another, they're helping one another, they're supporting one another, and we're all learning from one another. Okay, and on there we have all the content that I'm currently sharing now and more. There's a bunch of other bonuses that are there as well. So to join our Dollar Club, you can go to bit.ly/Dragon Dollar Club. Okay, bit.ly/Dragon Dollar Club, and it'll take you to our school community where we have all of that stuff and all of this content that we share on a regular basis. All right. So hopefully you saw value in what it is that we went over today. Hopefully it impacted your business. Hopefully it will prevent you from making the same mistakes that we've made in our own businesses, right? That's the definition of growth, is being able to learn from other people's mistakes so that you don't have to make the same mistakes, so that you can compress the time frames that it took us to be successful at what it is that we're doing. And if you did see that value, please make sure that you like this video. Comment on this video, participate in our conversation, ask questions about it so that other people can benefit from those questions, because if you have them, trust me, you're not the only one. There are other people that have the exact same questions. And make sure that you follow and share